name is Ryan Cam, and welcome back to the 1999 Project. And this might be the biggest episode of this project so far. Eight, count them, eight movies I have to cover this week. I checked, and I'm going to make this a little bit more of a brisk episode than normal. I'm going to up the pace a little bit because there are so many movies, but also a couple of the movies are pretty much dog shit. So for the sake of my sanity, I'm just going to breeze through them as quickly as I can. With that regard, though, thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and do all of that. With that in mind, let's begin. Starting off with a home video release from Columbia TriStar that just makes you ask yourself, why do they even bother doing Nutcracker movies? It's the nuttiest Nutcracker.
All right, baby!
Featuring the voices of Jim Belushi, Cheech Marin, and Phyllis Diller.
Hip, hip! Hooray!
The Nuttiest Nutcracker.
Nuttiest Nutcracker was directed by Harold Harris. That cannot be this man's real name. You cannot convince me of that. And this movie's just terrible. I mean, I usually talk about like plot and stuff, but honestly, this movie is just really, really bad. It's it's cut from that food fight cloth of where you just look at it and you just go, somebody actually paid money to make this. I have nothing really positive to say about it. The movie is just terrible. The animation is terrible. How bad, you say? It's not food fight bad, but it's ambling in the general direction of that. Not to mention it's combined with some very juvenile humor. And this is meant for children, lest we forget. One, you want to know proof? Here's one of the more air quotes funnier jokes. One of the villain of the movie is a rodent king who employs an army of beans to go after our heroes. What's the beans' primary weapon? Gas. This movie's 48 minutes long. It's not even an hour, and it felt twice that. This movie's horrid. There's no redeeming qualities to this whatsoever. I almost didn't want to watch it, but I do try. I am legitimately trying to watch everything that I can for this project. So the Nuttiest Nutcracker was on the docket for the sake of my brain cells. But now let's go from beans and nuts to bats. It's just called Bats. Bats was directed by Louis Morneau, and it starred Lou Diamond Phillips and Bob Gunton, among others. It tells the story of a small town in Texas that is bombarded by by a large array of gigantic, genetically modified bats. No, this did not premiere on the Sci-Fi Channel, in case you were wondering. I watched this almost immediately after the Nuttiest Nutcracker, so I was automatically assuming that this was just going to be dog terrible. It's not absolutely terrible. I have to give the movie credit in some areas, but overall, this is just a whole lot of nothing. What I will give credit for is number one, casting Lou Diamond Phillips and Bob Gunton. Those two were the best parts in the acting department by a significant lot. They are not given enough to do, especially Bob Gunton's role, who is the corrupt scientist, but is revealed, I guess, too late that it's the corrupt scientist, but is supposed to be a big reveal that he's the corrupt scientist, even though you see it coming from the moon. But it's Bob Gunton, the warden from Shawshank, so he naturally brings it, and he is one of the better parts of the movie. And I also have to give credit when you actually do see the bats, in some shots they actually look pretty good. There's a lot of CGI and a lot of smoke and mirrors. Like, for example, when the bats are attacking a person, you see the camera shake violently like the cameraman's trying to shake a martini. It's not shaky cam, but it's just up and down and all around and then smash cutting, like trying to picture chaos, and it just doesn't work. I feel like there could have been something more here, like a Jaws with bats, for example, but No, it's not even that. It's just it feels like there was meant to be more than this, and it feels like there could have been something with this at least, but no, there just wasn't. It's pretty forgettable. It's not bad, it's not horrible, it's not the worst, but overall, like I said, it just a whole lot of nothing. But now let's take a huge jump in quality and talk about the prequel to a movie that I've already covered in a separate series. It's called The Best Man.
Taye Diggs, Nia Long, and Morris Chestnut.
My hormones are raging out of control. I'm emotional. Good night.
The Best Man.
The Best Man was directed by Malcolm D. Lee, and it starred Taye Diggs, Morris Chestnut, and Nia Long, among others. It tells the story of a group of friends who are all reuniting for the first time to celebrate the wedding of a man named Lance, played by Morris Chestnut, and his wife-to-be named Robin. However, the main the main friend that keeps the friends all together, named Harper, played by Taye Diggs, has just written a book, a very successful book. And the book is loosely based on all of the friends. And there's some secrets in the book that threatens to drive a wedge into this very tight-knit friend group. Last year for Christmania, I covered a movie called The Best Man's Holiday. I had no idea that was the sequel to The Best Man until they started showing a bit of a recap of sorts at the very beginning of the movie. I can confirm, now that I've actually seen both The Best Man and The Best Man's Holiday, The Best Man's Holiday makes a whole lot more sense, and the relationships have a lot more weight. I guess I just enjoy watching things backwards, I suppose. What I'm trying to get at is that this movie was far better than I was anticipating. It's actually really, really good. The acting is strong across the board. Taye Diggs, Morris Chestnut, Nia Long are all great. Terrence Howard is really good also. Regina Hall, making her film debut, is in this movie, and she's good in the few scenes she has. Just to blow your mind a little bit, this is her debut, and then the next year she is in Scary Movie. She is the one girl who is in the theater reenacting the opening from Scream 2. Yeah, that's Regina Hall. Talk about range. And really, what makes the movie work is that you do believe that these people are indeed friends. And anything that comes along to threaten the relationship they're in just feels devastating. But because they've been away for so long and they all pretty much know everything about each other, it opens the door for a lot of very awkward situations. I won't spoil it here, but one of the biggest revelations of the movie involves Harper and Lance, and it threatens to derail their entire relationship as friends. And I thought that was very well done. It almost goes to the melodramatic route, but everyone is giving their all in the acting department, and I got sucked in. I was hoping that everyone would find a way to work it out. Give this a great rating, and I believe I gave The Best Man's Holiday a great rating as well. I really enjoyed both of these movies for two completely different reasons. And to be honest, I hear there's a third Best Man movie. I have not seen it yet, but I'm itching to see it just to complete the trilogy, I guess. Now we must take an off-ramp on to talk about, honestly, one of the more difficult movies I've had to talk about in not just this project, but in any video I've ever done on this channel. Boys Don't Cry.
So what are you gonna tell him? I'm gonna tell him what we know is true.
Boys Don't Cry was directed by Kimberly Pierce, and it starred Hilary Swank, Chloe Sevigny, and Peter Sarsgaard, among others. And this is based on an incredibly unfortunate true story. The true story of Brandon Teena, played in this movie by Hilary Swank. Brandon Teena is a transgender man, born a woman but identifies as Brandon Teena, and falls in love with a woman named Lana, played by Chloe Sevigny. This takes place in 1993 in the Midwest. And you can pretty much put together how how well that little relationship development goes over, not just with the town, but with their friend group. Let's just leave it at that. It's very rare when I'm doing a review like this that I'm speechless. Like Poughkeepsie Tapes, where I did that with Jacob Collins over on his channel, and then Lake Mungo for Scary Mania last year. It's rare when I feel like I don't really know what to say. This time around, it's much, much different because this involves a transgender individual, but it's a very sad story. I did a bit of a Google search on it after the movie, and typically the story is far darker than anything portrayed in the movie, and that is saying quite a bit. I'm not entirely sure if I should recommend this movie because of its technical merit, because in terms of technical and acting and all that, it's very good. Hilary Swank ended up winning Best Actress at the Oscars for this, and deservedly so. She crushed it. Chloe Sevigny does a great job as well, and Peter Sarsgaard is just goes above and beyond in playing John Lauder, which, by the way, throw the book at the real life John Lauder. Seriously, he deserves to be shuffled off this mortal coil, but I digress. But there are some scenes in this movie that are genuinely so disturbing that I almost can't really recommend this movie because of how disturbing they are. I'm not even going to show clips of the scene that I'm talking about or even pictures because I just don't know what the status would be on this video if it would be taken down or anything of that nature. All that you need to know is that there is a very graphic scene in this movie in which Brandon Teena gets assaulted. Gang assaulted. And you can pretty much put two and two together on that as to how uncomfortable that is. And again, it puts me in a bit of an awkward place because you get this very disturbing and dark and sad story, and give credit where credit's due to Kimberly Pierce, she pulled no punches. But at the same time, I almost feel like for a movie that's 25 years old, I don't know how well it holds up in today's context. So I really have no idea what to say. What I will say, though, is that technically there's nothing wrong with the movie. In terms of content, is really going to be up for debate. It's really going to be a know your mileage kind of movie. If you think you're going to like it, you'll like it. If you think you're going to hate it, then you're going to despise it. I had no expectations going in, and it's one of the most shocking films I've ever seen. I'm giving this an unrated rating because I am legitimately stumped. I don't know whether to say that this movie it's great technically, but it's also very disturbing. I just don't know. And I feel like I want to revisit this one day and try and see how I feel about it with a little bit more time. But as of right now, this movie left me legitimately stumped. So I pass it off to all of you. If you have seen Boys Don't Cry, what did you think about it? I'm interested to know. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. But parlaying away from that, let's talk about a movie from a very acclaimed director, a guy by the name of Martin Scorsese. It's Bringing Out the Dead.
But then something good will happen. Everything just glows.
Bringing Out the Dead, like I said, was directed by Martin Scorsese and starred Nicolas Cage, John Goodman, and Patricia Arquette. It tells the story of an EMT played by Cage, and it basically follows him throughout 48 hours of a shift working Hell's Kitchen in New York City as an ambulance driver. And there's not really one set story. It basically goes from one to the other to the other. Not necessarily anthology, but sort of kind of like an anthology. I had always heard that Bringing Out the Dead was one of Scorsese's more underrated films, and I had never seen it. Now that I have seen it, I don't know if underrated is necessarily the right word, But I did enjoy the film, with the caveat being I don't think this is Scorsese's best work. It's still good, though. I still maintain that Nicolas Cage is not just a meme, he is actually a very good actor when he tries, and he actually does try here. Without going too deep into it, the movie does a great job of showing that being an EMT is legit a very stressful job, and it just weighs down on him. He starts off kind of clean shaven and just like, this is just job, nothing more. But he sees things throughout these 48 hours that makes him question everything. The movie kind of hints at being a little supernatural, though I don't necessarily think it goes quite that far. That's a kind of a negative I have with the movie, but I'll talk more about that in a second. But I love the toll it takes on this character, seeing him go from quirky but still able to do his job to just despondent. Well, not despondent, but on the road to despair almost. John Goodman is predictably good as his partner in the ambulance. He has more than a few good scenes. Patricia Arquette is particularly great as well. It's a Martin Scorsese film. He knows how to pick his actors, and that's no different here. Like I said, I feel like there's a supernatural element here, and I feel like it's hinted at but never fully pulled the trigger on. I'm not saying Martin Scorsese should have gone a full ghost story mode with this, but if he did, then it would have been very interesting to see what he would have done there. But I digress on that. In terms of Scorsese's filmography, I've not seen all of his work, but I don't think this is his best work. It's still very good, though. I'm going to give this a good rating, but a high good rating. It's not my favorite of his, but it certainly is an enjoyable watch in bursts. All right, y'all, we're over the halfway point. We're almost there, I promise. Let's keep going with a very strange little film directed by Zorro. I'll explain why in a second. It's Crazy in Alabama.
Crazy in Alabama.
Crazy in Alabama was directed by Antonio Banderas. Yes, Zorro from Mask of Zorro and Legend of Zorro, Puss in Boots himself, directed a film. And it starred Melanie Griffiths, David Morse, Lucas Black, among others. It tells the story of a woman played by Melanie Griffiths who kills her husband. That's not a spoiler. It happens in one of the first scenes of the movie off screen. And she uses that as an excuse to run away to Hollywood to gain television stardom. However, she leaves behind her massive family, including her brother, played by David Morse, who has to contend with a very racist sheriff played by Meatloaf.
I would do anything for love.
Yes, that Meatloaf. And all while she's gone, the sheriff goes, well, goes full-on racist when he, air quotes, accidentally kills a young African-American boy around a swimming pool. My jaw legit hit the ground when I found out that Antonio Banderas directed this. But to be perfectly honest, I think he did a pretty solid job. The movie's not perfect by any means, but this was honestly very enjoyable. Melanie Griffiths is good. She has a few good scenes, especially near the end, which I won't spoil here, but it involves a court case, and she basically talks about her list of every bad thing she has done and everything that has been happening to her, because the movie does a good job of showing that her husband that she kills is a terrible human being who did very bad things to her, including getting her pregnant multiple times when she did not consent to, being at a football game and her having her water break and not having to go to the hospital until halftime. I've never been pregnant before, but I'm pretty sure that's not safe. And then him poking her in the diaphragm repeatedly with a pen. I'm pretty sure that's not healthy either. So the movie does a good job of showing that she does a bad thing, but she is also a victim. And ultimately, it doesn't make her innocent, but it also doesn't make her guilty either. The movie does a good job of striking that balance. And honestly, if the movie had just been about her, I would have loved it. But instead, the movie feels like it's two movies crushed together into one, because not only do you have to deal with Melanie Griffith's character, you also have to deal with Meatloaf being a racist piece of shit, to the African American community in this town, and him, air quotes, not trying to cause another Selma, and instead causing another Selma, including having Martin Luther King show up in their town, played by a stunt double who is mocking speaking, and him having ADR, Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice in a speech. All of this being narrated by a young Lucas Black of Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift fame, who plays Melanie Griffith's character's nephew. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on with this, and it almost does not work, because just when I'm invested in the storyline with the sheriff, there's also the storyline in which Melanie Griffith's character actually gets on Bewitched, and she actually has success. But she has her husband's head in one of those Tupperware containers. Legit, this happens in the movie. I'm not making this up. And she carries his head around with her. Literally, this is a thing that happens. And so the movie just does not know how to strike a balance in that, focusing on one or the other and just like cutting out one. There's no way to discern between the two. But irregardless of that, on the strength of the performances, with a pretty loaded cast, including, not to mention Melanie Griffith's David Morse, Meatloaf, and Lucas Black, but also Rod Steiger of In the Heat of the Night fame is in this as a very exasperated judge. He only has a handful of scenes, but he is pretty great. Overall, I'm going to give this a good rating, but a high good rating. The movie's not perfect. It feels very confused at times, but when the movie's on, it's really on. Antonio Banderas needs to direct more movies, please. But with that, we just got a couple more left, and this double feature might as well just be called Hollywood trying to understand things it just doesn't. Starting off with autism, in the form of the movie Molly.
That can set her spirit free. Academy Award nominee Elizabeth Shue. Molly.
Molly was directed by John Dugan? Deegan? It's spelled D-U-I-G-A-N, and I don't know how to pronounce it. But the movie stars Elizabeth Shue and Aaron Eckhart, among others. It tells the story of a man named Buck, played by Aaron Eckhart, who is forced to take in his sister after the nursing home that she is living in is being closed down. She has autism, and the autism where basically she cannot live on her own. She just can't. And so it exasperates Buck to no end. However, he learns of a treatment that could, air quotes, cure her of her autism and turn her into a genius at the same time. Yeah, that's what we're rocking with here, folks, and this movie's pretty bad. A few months ago, at the start of this whole 99 project, I covered a movie called At First Sight, in which Val Kilmer plays a blind man who got treatment to cure his blindness, but then slowly started going blind again. I wasn't a big fan of the movie, but it had its moments of genuine romance, and the characters were likable enough. It's the same thing here with Molly, but with none of the likability. It's Rain Man without anything that made Rain Man good. And I haven't seen Rain Man in a minute, but from what I remember, the movie's actually quite good. This is like the worst elements of In First Sight and Rain Man crammed into an hour and 42-minute package. This thing was just a chore to get through. I'm on the autism spectrum. I have this thing called nonverbal learning disorder. I'm not on the spectrum. I'm like next door to the spectrum. I'm a friend of the autism family, if you will. I get invites to all of the family get-togethers, and I get a Christmas card every year. So I guess I'm in the family at this point. So I've done some research on autism and the spectrum and all that. I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure this movie misses the mark completely on what autism actually is, because some of the scenarios that are in this movie are just maddening. I'll give you one and just leave it at that. There is a scene about 25 minutes into the movie in which Buck takes Molly in for the first time. He has to go to work. He's works at an ad agency, and he's pitching this ad to these clients. Molly gets hot, and so she takes off all of her clothes and bursts into the meeting room completely naked. All the while everyone's gawking at her, Buck takes his jacket off and like covers her up and escorts her out. But then one of the executives who's Japanese, I think, turns to his colleague and says, "Ain't America a great country or what?"
How hilarious. How highly, highly humorous.
I'm sure this movie is not particularly great for a lot of reasons involving how autism is portrayed, but this movie was just straight up not funny. And even if it was trying to be funny, it was just copying scenarios that you've probably seen in Rain Man or in First Sight, or even Baby Boom. Like, you remember Baby Boom, the Diane Keaton movie in which the stressed out ad agent finds out that she's an aunt and takes in her niece and then basically takes over her whole life. It's kind of similar to this in Molly. However, there's no love in this one like Baby Boom fosters throughout that whole movie. This movie's horrid. It's just not good. Like, I struggle to find anything redeeming to say about it. Aaron Eckhart is trying, but that's about it. But now let's close things out from going from autism to the gay community in terms of what Hollywood thinks it is, question mark. It's Three to Tango.
3 to Tango.
Actually, I had a lesbian experience once.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
Three to Tango was directed by Damon Santostefano. I hope I said that right. And the movie starred Matthew Perry, rest in peace, Neve Campbell, and Oliver Platt, among others. It tells the story of a duo of architects who are partners in their architecture business and nothing more. However, Oliver Platt's character is in fact gay. They're going after this very high-end client, and they get the job on the condition that Matthew Perry's character, who is seen by the tycoon as gay, spies on his mistress, played by Neve Campbell. And let the creepiness begin. If you've seen a movie similar to this from this time period and there is a gay character in there, the same jokes still apply. And it's kind of maddening because the cast in here is actually rather solid. Matthew Perry is good. Neve Campbell is great. Dylan McDermott plays the tycoon and he's good here. The problem is just that some of these scenarios are just straight up not funny at best or cringy at worst. And this is not just because of they don't portray the gay community in a good light. I don't think it does in this movie, but it's just the same like stereotypes and jokes that you've seen before, and it's just really not funny to me. And it gets real old real quick, and it basically gives Matthew Perry's character a license to be kind of a creep in more than one occasion. Like, Neve Campbell's character believes that because Matthew Perry's character is gay, that gives him like a license to act in the way that he does, even though that's not how it works. Like, she details a lesbian experience that she had in college to him, and he's just like, interesting, when in reality, he fantasizes about lesbian sex. It just maddening stuff. It really is. And yeah, I have nothing left to say on it. The movie's horrid. It was just awkward, cringy, and bad. But we have reached the end of the road. What did you all think of any of the movies I've talked about? Let me know in the comments. I would love to read what you have to say. I assure you better movies are coming next week. Just a bit of a tease, how's Being John Malkovich sound?